So a lot of my work has been in the last 15 years about strategy, and I'll tell you about my journey later. We're doing this the other way around. And I work a lot with people, and that's what I like. I like people, right? So I like working with people. People means people on the roads, people in other places, people in homes and offices and wherever. And I really, really do think that sometimes in design, we tend to forget people. In architecture, we definitely do. In design, we always run the risk of doing that. So this is a quick short presentation about how we see and ways of seeing. So we all look at this image and the emotion that is evoked, for some maybe of recognition, for some maybe of, maybe not in this gathering, but sometimes in some other gatherings of devotion or piety. So this is like a darshan. But darshan in the Indian context is not just about you seeing somebody, it's also about what you're seeing or who you're seeing you. So the viewer is viewing, but he's also being viewed. Even in Indian philosophy, darshan is a two-way process. You're in front of a deity, but the deity is in front of you. So in that sense, there is the process of viewing, but there's also the process of being viewed. So it is the sight of a deity or a holy person, and I'm taking this in the context of our people as auspicious or as holy to us and how we look at them. There are the viewers, as you can see in this particular context, and then of course there is that what we view. This is of course from Tirupati, and then of course there's the whole notion of a darshan. So taking that into my work, there is the secondary viewing and the archival viewing. So when I do my work, there's a lot of archival viewing that I do, which means that I go into a lot of popular culture, which may be cinema, which may be folklore, which may be myths and mythologies, which may be any of that. And so yeah, movies, museums and memorabilia, all of that. Just to give you an example, and I know this audience knows about it, this is a great resource which is the India Memory Project by Anuja Chauhan, which is records all photographs. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you see it. It's a great resource for having a look at some of our archival photographs. My favorite pastime is to go into a town and look for an old photo studio. They are fast disappearing, but if you can get to a photo studio and just look at the pictures that they have, they are absolutely fantastic archival records. There's also now, by another young lady, Aanchal Malhotra, a museum of material memory, where she collects artifacts which belong to ordinary people like you and me, but which also have stories to tell. That's another great resource. So this is what happens when you're sitting in the studio or you're researching. So there's a lot of things that happen, but then you go out, and as an architect, I always like to think, I get attracted to built environment, and I see it all the time. We have all seen things like this. The water tanks which take profound forms, like this is a house, but I have seen aeroplanes, Maruti 800s, any number of things, an Eiffel Tower at one go, and all of that. This again, these are real life pictures that one has taken. They don't come with a design mandate. Somebody, I think this is in Indore, somebody decided, or Nasik, one of those two, decided that they wanted a tree on their house, and that's what they have. And we see this all around us, you know. We can call it kitsch, we can call it Gaudi celebration, but that is how people in this country and maybe many other countries behave. So is it the kitsch aesthetic? Is it tradition, or is it influence? What are we talking about? What are the contexts that we apply? So if we look at traditionally also, if you look at a temple Gopuram in South India, would you call it kitsch if you didn't know that it was from a Gopuram? And therefore my next, look at it deeper before we stereotype. So what distinguishes human beings from most other species, or actually any other species, is our ability to remember and form habits. And that is how we've been able to develop. we've been able to remember, we've been able to see a grain and remember that it can grow and it can be harvested at a particular time. And we retain that memory, and that makes us a habit of cultivation. So the very evolution of human beings depends on our ability to remember and replicate. And that's what has led to our growth as a species. But that also leads to very interesting things. This is a traditional Bengal house, which is made of thatch. And that is where the Bengal roof comes from. But if you look at the second image, there is the same roof replicated in terracotta tiles as well as in GI sheets. It needn't have the same form, but it does. So that is what I call the persistence of formal memory. Whether it is our ghada, a ghada which is made in mud needs, or a pot which is made in mud needs a certain shape because of the process that is involved. It needn't be that shape when it is in plastic, but it retains. Just to give that example that our formal memories or our memories are not easy to negate, and they take time, and we celebrate them as well. This is a persistent of memory, and of course content is king, but context is God. I mean, you cannot take anything out of context and place it or understand it or do anything about it. Like, this is just an example going back on that kitsch thing. So this is a presentation by Tukral and Tagra, you would know about them. That is again an artifact in one of the fancy design stores, and you can of course see, it's all very Andy Warholian, if you remember. Remember Andy Warhol and his soups? And the whole thing. But now when I put it in context, that image is from this little town in Punjab, which is actually just advertising passport photographs. And the whole idea of putting Barack Obama there is also aspirational. This was of course taken at a time when Obama was still the president. So if I look at it in isolation, I can put it in high art. But when I look at it in context, I see where it is grounded. And that's why I say that content may be king, but context is God. And that is something that I firmly believe in my world. So material and visual culture is what I work with, and there are two ways of kind of working with it. Now just a very quick glimpse on how would you decode visual culture, and a lot of my work lies around that. So quick question, what do you see? Come on, anybody, what do you see? Just tell me what you see, don't have to think deep about it. Burqas, sorry? A fair, yeah.
Buying slippers.
They're buying slippers, yes. So Muslim women, I presume, or we all presume, in abayas. So what are the kind of thoughts that are coming to your mind? About gender, about religion, about agency? Are there such thoughts coming to your mind, which we are bombarded with all the time? And then what do you make of this image?
That's pollution and religion.
Yes, it is. Very two different sets of women, at least in our mind. But at the same time, there is something very common that drives them. So while in that case, the only difference is of choice and agency. While in the first case it may have been enforced, in the second case it's voluntary. It's not just pollution or the sun's rays, it's also non-identity. Trust me, a lot of girls in smaller towns revel in this, because then they're not identified. Then they can go wherever they want, they can talk to anybody who they want to. So it's again something they do on their own. It is not just about the skin and the air and everything, which is of course a very, very legitimate excuse to do it. I'm essentially talking about unobvious truths, and going back to, so another very interesting example, matrimonial portals, which tell us a lot about our culture. So there are region specific. There are even interesting things like governmentshadi.com. Did you know? Which only advertise for shadi for government servants. And there's of course manglikmatrimony.com. So which advertise for mangliks. So all of these notions come into, as designers, and most of you would be working in visual cultures, but whatever we create goes out there and creates more material culture. So what are the tropes and stereotypes that we are falling into or following is again debatable. And just to take an example of something like this, I can do a full lecture on this kind of the semiotics of this image, which when you are designing many websites, you may have thought of it. So it's select shadi, it's definitely premium if you look at it. As designers, we can all understand that it's slightly more premium. There is a girl who's definitely working, she's got a bag on her shoulder, she's smart, she's urban, and at the same time she's leaning on her dad to find her the right match. So these are all the kinds of tropes that they are subconsciously built into that, and these are the messages that the sites also want to, I mean, in the sense it is about that, you know, much love, and part of it is also speculation, but you can, if you, I mean, we can take it forward with done research and all of that. So all of these things, the, you know, your everyday life gets completely influenced by this. So they are some of the strong things that I have noticed in Indian matrimonial portals. They have a very strong visuality, there is a social stratification, they are region specific, they are religion specific, there are matrimonial portals for HIV as well as physically differently abled people. There is also very gendered imagery and skin color. So these are just some of the initial points, and while we may not think that this may happen, but it does happen. So very, very quickly ending this one, this is just a context as to how we look at that image. The Bride of Arnolfini, as you all know, is a medieval Dutch painting, and we don't understand it, maybe, some of us who may have not studied art, because it also has a lot of cued in meanings. Like dog, for example, is a symbol of marital fidelity. Candles signify the presence of Jesus. Now this is all medieval iconography which we don't know of, but on the other hand we understand this. So you know how context becomes very, very important in when we are looking at anything that we do. So that was very, very briefly about, because I just have 20 minutes, about the kind of work that I do. So I started my journey as an architect. I had very little clue about what architecture was, like other than Fountainhead and maybe a little bit more. But S.P.A was a hoot, and I don't think I would trade it for anything else. I don't know about architecture, but I learned a lot. And then the Italians came to S.P.A. in 1989-90. We had a massive exhibition with the Italians. A book called Quality by Design got published by Alberto Canetta and Saumitri. And the Department of Industrial Design was set up in 1993. I joined as one of the first few students of the department, and it was a fantastic 2 years because everybody, it was one of the first few departments of industrial design or design outside of Ahmedabad and Bombay to open before IIT Delhi, and everybody, I mean, you name anybody who is anybody in the world of design taught us, from Jogi to Kumar Vyas, who came for juries, to MP Ranjan, to anybody, and I don't think you came, but other than that, everybody else did. Then I got into some sort of practice, and I worked with Kid Stuff, which was then Tinker Toys, working on brands which are listed here. Briefly also with Takshika, another person you might recognize, Arvind, who now has morphed it into Kriya, and other private projects. Along with that, there was also Kashmir. So I'm a Kashmiri, and these were conflict times. But I did win a competition in the main street of Kashmir, the Residency Road. You know, as an aside, I will say that I was looking for a picture of Residency Road, and I was so sad to see that whenever there are pictures of Kashmir, they all show deserted roads. I don't know whether that's by design or that's natural, but I couldn't find a picture of Residency Road which had the shops open. Anyhow, so I won a competition which moved to the point, it was very well organized and all of that, but it didn't move beyond a point, and also worked with CDI on craft interventions and all. All this was happening in a phase between, say, 1995 to almost 2005. What I will just say here that to work with the government, the scope to impact is immense. It's just that it's very difficult to work sometimes with the government. I can talk about these later more in detail. And working for about 10 years, I came to the conclusion, and that's what Sujata briefly mentioned, that design got taken as something of just an end product. Somebody else decided the brief, somebody else made the strategy, and then they came to us just to manifest it. My penny drop moment was when I was working with KFC. This was their first entry into India, and they had an outlet in New Friends Colony. I don't know if you remember it. And they came to me with the design of the restaurant, and the brief was very clear that we have to have a murga. And they would not budge from that. A murga is a rooster. So they needed a children's play area which will have a massive rooster toy in it, a little bit like Ronald McDonald. And however much I tried to convince them, a direct interpretation might not be the best thing. But so that was the time when I said, but you know, and they gave me all sorts of reasons. We've done the research and children love it and all of that. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, that was my moment when I said, okay, this will not work because, you know, all the time one is struggling with this. But if Muhammad shall not come to mountain, so mountain shall go to Muhammad, is what I say. So I went off to Brunel and did a course in design strategy. And my thesis in 2005 was design thinking in business. Now, design thinking today is a much flouted and touted and abused and bandaged word. I like not to use it very much now or think about my thesis, which I'm still very fond of. I thought it was a valuable thesis, but the way it's kind of developed, I'm a little skeptical. In the course of my studies, I had the opportunities of meeting some really important and influential people in the world of design, like Michael Wolff, David Kelly, and like. And then I got into the more strategic side of things, whether it was with DI Works, now called DI Works, that time called DMA Branding, British Council Future Brands, and also teaching Mirambika, S.P.A, NID, NIFT, TVB School of Habitat Studies. I just wanted you to take you through the journey that I've had, because I've moved from being a hardcore architect designer to somebody who works more in strategy and now in strategic design, education, leadership, whatever that may be. The journey was that in 2003, David said that they've moved from thinking of ourselves, a little bit about design thinking, from thinking of designers to thinking of design thinkers. And it became really the buzzword in 2008 when Tim Brown published in HBR. And after that, it's been a crazy journey. My thesis was somewhere right in between. It was in 2005. And then in 2011, Bruce Nussbaum, who used to be an evangelist for design thinking in Fast Company, presented an article which said that design thinking is a failed experiment. I'm afraid at that time I completely agreed with him, because I was so tired of everybody doing posted design thinking that I'd really sort of given it up as the next fad for management cadres. So just to end, so I don't think design thinking is dead, not really. It's just that I think we've lost the plot somewhat, and I really believe that we have, and it's not limited to designers, of course. I really think that if I look at the example of Gandhi, he personified it. He questioned, I mean, all the design thinking steps that we talk about. You question, you define, you build empathy, you ideate, you prototype, you iterate, and you build a narrative. He did all of that when he worked on the British in India. He built empathy and his empathy building was by traveling around the country, initially in South Africa and then in India. He prototyped in South Africa, and then he came to India and he iterated, and he built a narrative. And whenever he iterated, okay, so Swadeshi, the first lot wouldn't work, he would retract. He was very happy iterating, taking a risk, and relaunching something. If we look at the history of Gandhi and his movements, we will see it very clearly. My last point is then this about human-centered design. I'm completely against human-centered design. I think I hate that notion of putting human beings in the center of anything, because we ruin everything. So I think I would really start, all of us to start thinking about design which is centered around humanity or humanism, the planet perhaps, rather than just humans. So I think this notion of human-centered design is something that bothers me a lot. I won't go into that. I think therefore I am, and I'm still thinking, just to leave you with last three thoughts. 3 musketeers, one for all for one. So more empathy, more immersions, more field trips, more user research. I believe in kintsugi. Please make and get into artisanal creativity. Let's look at circular economies, traditional knowledge systems, and sustainable economies. And of course, my favorite is Alice. I completely believe in the world of chaos and Wonderland. And I think these are the 3 things that I could leave you with. Thank you so much.